My name is Monica Thompson, and at 32, I thought I understood the rhythm of betrayal in healthcare. As a nurse practitioner at Oceanside Medical Center in Newport Beach, Delaware, I'd witnessed colleagues undermined by gossip, seen promising careers derailed by politics, and watched good people leave because they couldn't navigate the unspoken hierarchies that governed our sterile halls. But I never imagined the betrayal would come from someone I trusted with my financial future. The first sign should have been Catherine Stone's sudden interest in my continuing education plans. As our assistant nurse manager, she'd always been supportive but distant, the kind of supervisor who remembered your birthday but never asked about your weekend. When she started lingering by my workstation in the cardiac unit, asking detailed questions about my preceptor responsibilities and teaching commitments, I assumed she was finally recognizing my contributions to the department. "Monica, you're doing such important work with our new graduates," she'd say, her voice carrying that particular warmth reserved for performance reviews and budget meetings. "I want to make sure you're getting every dollar you deserve for those extra hours." The compliment felt genuine. Catherine had been with Oceanside for 8 years, working her way up from staff nurse to assistant manager, through what everyone acknowledged was exceptional dedication. She handled our department's continuing education reimbursements, managed our clinical ladder applications, and somehow made the Byzantine hospital bureaucracy work in our favor. When nurses complained about delayed stipend payments or missing documentation, Catherine fixed it. When the administration threatened to cut our professional development budget, she fought for us. I trusted her because everyone trusted her. The second sign was subtler, a shift in the way she handled my paperwork. Previously, Catherine would process my preceptor pay requests within days, often stopping by to confirm details or clarify hours. But over the past 3 months, those interactions had become increasingly vague. She'd nod when I mentioned teaching responsibilities, make notes I couldn't quite see, and assure me everything was being handled appropriately. The phrase began to feel like a verbal tick, repeated whenever I asked about payment timelines or reimbursement status. "Don't worry, Monica. It's being handled appropriately." Last Tuesday, I'd submitted my monthly preceptor hours, 12 shifts of orienting new graduates, plus 6 hours of classroom instruction for our department's skills validation program. Standard work that should have generated a straightforward stipend payment. When I asked Catherine about the timeline, she'd smiled that same warm smile and delivered the familiar refrain. But this time, something in her eyes didn't match her voice. The third sign came yesterday during our monthly staff meeting. Catherine was reviewing the department's financial performance, highlighting our success in meeting productivity targets and maintaining our professional development budget. She specifically mentioned the preceptor program's value to the hospital, noting how our experienced nurses were generously compensated for their teaching contributions. The phrase stuck with me, generously compensated. I thought about my own stipend payments, always correct, always on time, but hardly generous. The hospital paid a modest hourly rate for preceptor work, enough to acknowledge the extra responsibility but not enough to significantly impact anyone's income. Yet Catherine spoke as if we were receiving substantial bonuses. After the meeting, I approached Diana Lawrence, one of our senior nurses who'd been precepting even longer than I had. "Diana, can I ask you something about the stipend payments? Catherine made it sound like we're getting more than I thought." Diana's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "What do you mean?" She said we're, quote, generously compensated. "I just want to make sure I'm not missing something in my calculations." "Monica," Diana said carefully, "maybe you should review your pay stubs more closely. And maybe compare them with your submitted hours." The suggestion felt innocent enough, but Diana's tone carried an undercurrent I couldn't identify. She glanced around the empty conference room, then leaned closer. "Sometimes the numbers don't add up the way we expect them to." Now, sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage, I'm staring at 3 months of pay stubs spread across my passenger seat. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the papers, making the numbers blur together. But even in this dim light, the discrepancy is becoming clear. My submitted hours don't match my compensation, not even close. And if Diana's cryptic warning means what I think it means, Catherine Stone, the woman we all trusted to protect our interests, might be the reason why. The next morning, I arrived at Oceanside Medical Center 30 minutes early, my laptop bag heavy with printed pay stubs and timesheets. The hospital's main corridor buzzed with the familiar pre-shift energy. Housekeeping crews finishing their rounds, pharmacy techs wheeling medication carts, and the overnight staff preparing for handoff. I'd walked these halls for 3 years, but today everything felt different, like I was seeing the place through a stranger's eyes. I badged into the ICU and headed straight for the break room, spreading my documents across the small table near the window. The morning light revealed what the parking garage's fluorescent bulbs had only hinted at, a pattern of discrepancies that made my stomach clench. According to my records, I'd submitted 42 hours of preceptor work over the past 3 months. My pay stub showed compensation for 28 hours. The continuing education reimbursement I'd requested for my CCRN renewal, $485, had been approved by Catherine but never appeared in my account. 2 teaching stipends for the new graduate orientation program were missing entirely. "You're here early," Catherine's voice made me jump. She stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, her expression curious but not concerned. "Everything okay?" I quickly gathered my papers, but not quickly enough. Catherine's eyes tracked the movement, and I saw her register the pay stubs, the highlighted discrepancies. "Just reviewing some paperwork," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Anything I can help with?" She stepped into the room, and suddenly the space felt much smaller. "I know the payroll system can be confusing sometimes. Epic's integration with our HR platform isn't always seamless." The explanation came so smoothly, so readily, that I wondered how many times she'd used it before. "Actually, yes. I think there might be an error with my preceptor payments. The hours don't seem to match what I submitted." Catherine set down her coffee and pulled out her phone. "Let me check the system real quick. What time period are we looking at?" I watched her fingers move across the screen, her face a mask of professional concern. After a moment, she frowned. I'm seeing some discrepancies too. Looks like there might have been a glitch when we transitioned to the new payroll system last quarter. I'll need to submit a correction request to HR. What about the continuing education reimbursement? That one's trickier. The hospital changed the approval process mid-year, and some requests got caught in the transition. I'll need to resubmit your paperwork, but it should go through this time. Every answer was reasonable, every explanation plausible. Catherine had been handling these administrative details for 2 years, and I'd never had reason to doubt her competence. But Diana's warning echoed in my mind. Sometimes the numbers don't add up the way we expect them to. "I appreciate you looking into it," I said. "Should I expect the corrections on my next paycheck?" "Probably the one after that. HR likes to batch these corrections together." Catherine picked up her coffee, signaling the end of our conversation. "Don't worry, Monica. I'll make sure everything gets sorted out." The morning shift began, with its usual controlled chaos. We received 2 post-surgical patients from the OR, and I spent the first 4 hours focused entirely on assessments, medication administration, and family communication. It wasn't until lunch break that I had a chance to think about anything beyond immediate patient care. I found Diana in the nutrition room methodically eating a salad while reviewing lab results on her tablet. "Can we talk?" I asked, glancing around to make sure we were alone. Diana looked up, and I saw something in her expression that hadn't been there yesterday. A wariness that made my chest tighten. "About what?" "The pay discrepancies. I looked at my records like you suggested." She set down her fork and studied my face for a long moment. "And?" 14 hours missing from the last 3 months. Plus reimbursements that were approved but never processed. I kept my voice low even though the nutrition room was empty. "Catherine says it's a system glitch." "Of course she does." Diana's response was immediate, bitter. "Monica, how long have you been precepting?" "About 18 months. "And in that time, how many system glitches have you experienced?" I thought about it. This is the first one. Right. Because the system works fine when Catherine isn't involved in the processing. Diana closed her tablet and leaned forward. "I've been tracking my own payments for 6 months now. Every single discrepancy traces back to requests that went through her desk." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You think she's—" "I think Catherine Stone has been skimming from our professional development funds for longer than either of us realizes." Diana's voice was barely above a whisper. "And I think we're not the only ones affected." "But why?" She makes good money as assistant nurse manager. Why risk her career for... Have you seen her car lately? The new BMW in the reserved parking spot? Diana's smile was grim. Or notice the designer handbags, the expensive jewelry. Assistant nurse manager's salary doesn't cover that lifestyle, especially not with 2 kids in private school. I thought about Catherine's recent appearance changes, the subtle but noticeable upgrades in her wardrobe, the professional manicures, the way she'd mentioned her family's vacation to Europe last month. Details I'd attributed to good financial planning or perhaps a spouse's promotion. We need proof, I said. We need to be careful, Diana corrected. Catherine has access to our personnel files, our performance reviews, our scheduling preferences. She could make our lives very difficult if she suspects we're onto her. The afternoon passed in a blur of routine tasks that felt anything but routine. Every interaction with Catherine carried new weight. Every casual conversation a potential minefield. When she stopped by my patient's room to check on a medication order, I found myself analyzing her tone, her body language, searching for signs of deception I'd missed before. At 1,800 hours, as the day shift prepared for handoff, Catherine approached me with a clipboard. Monica, I need you to sign off on your preceptor hours for this week, just a formality for the new tracking system. I looked at the form. The hours listed were accurate, but something about the request felt off. I thought we submitted these electronically now. We do, but HR wants paper backup for the first month while they work out the bugs. Catherine's smile was warm, professional, completely believable. Just sign at the bottom and I'll make sure it gets processed correctly. I signed, but as I handed back the clipboard, I noticed Catherine's fingers linger on the paper. She was memorizing something. My signature, perhaps, or the way I formed certain letters. The observation sent a chill down my spine. That evening, I sat in my apartment with my laptop open, scrolling through the hospital's employee portal. The system allowed staff to view their own payroll history, but accessing detailed records required administrative privileges I didn't have. What I could see, however, was enough to confirm my growing suspicions. The pattern was subtle but consistent. Preceptor payments that should have been processed weren't. Continuing education reimbursements that showed as approved in the system never translated to actual deposits. Teaching stipends that disappeared between submission and payment. I thought about Diana's warning, about Catherine's defensive explanations, about the signature she'd studied so carefully, and I realized that tomorrow I would need to make a choice. Confront the betrayal directly, or find another way to expose the truth. Either way, my relationship with Catherine Stone, and possibly my career at Oceanside Medical Center, was about to change forever. The next morning, I arrived at Oceanside Medical Center with a plan. Instead of confronting Catherine directly, I decided to gather concrete evidence first. The employee portal had shown me enough to confirm my suspicions, but I needed documentation that would stand up to scrutiny. During my break, I visited HR on the 3rd floor. The department occupied a sterile suite of full offices overlooking the hospital's main courtyard, where palm trees swayed in the Delaware coastal breeze. I approached the reception desk with what I hoped was casual confidence. Hi, I'm Monica Thompson from the ICU. I'm having trouble accessing my continuing education reimbursement records in the portal. Could someone help me print out my payment history for the past 6 months? The HR representative, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, nodded sympathetically. System's been glitchy lately. Let me pull that up for you. She typed rapidly, then frowned at her screen. That's odd. I'm showing several approved reimbursements, but no corresponding payments. Let me check with payroll. 20 minutes later, I left HR with a folder full of documents that painted a damning picture. Approved continuing education requests totaling $3,200 over 6 months, all marked as processed by Catherine Stone, but with no record of actual payment. Preceptor stipends showing similar patterns, approved, processed, but never paid. The evidence was clear, but I needed to understand the scope. Was I the only victim, or were others affected? That afternoon, I found Diana Martinez restocking supplies in the medication room. Diana, can I ask you something confidential? I kept my voice low, checking to ensure we were alone. She looked up from the IV fluid bag she was organizing. Of course. What's going on? Have you received all your continuing education reimbursements this year? The ones Catherine processes for our department? Diana's expression shifted, becoming guarded. Why do you ask? I think there might be a problem with the processing. I'm missing several payments. Diana set down the IV bag she was holding and turned to face me fully. Monica, I've been wondering about that myself. I attended that cardiac certification course in March, $800 for registration and materials. Catherine assured me it would be reimbursed within 30 days, but I never saw the money. When I asked about it, she said there were delays in the system. How many others do you think might be affected? In our department alone, at least 6 nurses have mentioned continuing education expenses this year. If Catherine's been skimming from all of us, Diana's voice trailed off as the implications sank in. We agreed to quietly reach out to our colleagues, gathering information without alerting Catherine to our investigation. Over the next 2 days, a disturbing pattern emerged. 7 nurses in our department had submitted continuing education reimbursement requests, totaling over $15,000. None had received payment, despite Catherine's assurances that everything was being processed normally. The preceptor pay situation was even more complex. As experienced nurses, several of us regularly mentored new hires and nursing students, earning additional compensation for our teaching responsibilities. These payments were supposed to be automatic, processed monthly based on hours logged in the system. But when we compared our records, we discovered significant discrepancies. Lawrence Mitchell, one of our senior nurses, had been precepting for 3 years. I always assumed the pay was just lower than I expected, he admitted when I approached him discreetly. Catherine handles all the paperwork, and she's always been so helpful with explanations when I had questions. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Catherine had been systematically stealing from her colleagues for months, possibly years. She'd used her position as assistant nurse manager to access payroll systems, forge documentation, and manipulate records. The trust we'd placed in her, the trust that made us vulnerable, had been weaponized against us. On Thursday morning, I made the decision to report the fraud. I gathered all the documentation Diana and I had collected and requested a meeting with our nurse manager, Catherine Williams. The irony of the shared first name wasn't lost on me as I sat in her office, explaining what we'd discovered. Catherine Williams listened with growing alarm as I presented the evidence. Bank statements, HR records, testimony from affected colleagues. It painted an undeniable picture of systematic theft. This is serious, Monica. If what you're alleging is true, we're looking at potential criminal charges, not just employment termination. She studied the documents spread across her desk. I need to involve hospital administration immediately, and will need to contact the authorities. The investigation moved swiftly once it began. Hospital security reviewed badge access logs, showing Catherine Stone had been accessing the payroll office after hours. IT forensics uncovered deleted emails and altered electronic records. The paper trail Diana and I had started to uncover was just the beginning. The full scope of Catherine's fraud extended far beyond our department. By Friday afternoon, Catherine Stone was escorted from the building by security. I watched from the ICU nurses station as she walked past, her usually confident demeanor replaced by something hollow and defeated. She didn't look in our direction, but I felt the weight of broken trust settling over the entire unit. The aftermath was complicated. Hospital administration launched a comprehensive audit of all departments Catherine had access to. The investigation revealed she'd stolen over $47,000 in continuing education reimbursements and preceptor payments across multiple units over 18 months. The money had been diverted to accounts she controlled, with forged signatures and falsified documentation covering her tracks. Diana became my closest ally during the investigation process. Together, we testified to internal investigators, provided documentation, and helped identify other victims. The experience bonded us in a way that transcended typical workplace relationships. We'd uncovered a betrayal that struck at the heart of our professional community. I keep thinking about all the time she seemed so helpful, Diana said one evening as we finished our shift. The way she'd stay late to help with paperwork, how she always had explanations for delays or problems. She was using our trust against us. The legal proceedings began within weeks. Catherine Stone was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and identity theft. The hospital faced scrutiny from regulatory bodies about oversight procedures and financial controls. For those of us who'd been victimized, there was a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Justice was being served, but the betrayal had damaged something fundamental about our workplace relationships. As the investigation concluded and Catherine's court date approached, I found myself reflecting on the signs I'd missed, the trust I'd given so freely. The hospital implemented new oversight procedures, requiring dual authorization for all financial transactions and regular audits of reimbursement processes. But the real change was more subtle. A wariness that hadn't existed before, a recognition that professional relationships, no matter how warm or supportive they appeared, required vigilance. The betrayal had taught us all a harsh lesson about the vulnerability that comes with trust, and the devastating consequences when that trust is exploited by someone we considered a colleague and friend. 18 months later, I stood in my new office at Coastal Regional Medical Center, reviewing the employee protection policies I'd spent the past year developing. The morning sun streamed through windows that faced the harbor, a view that still brought me peace after the storm I'd weathered at Oceanside. My promotion to Director of Professional Development had come with the specific mandate to create safeguards against the kind of exploitation Catherine Stone had perpetrated. The irony wasn't lost on me. My experience as a victim had qualified me to protect others from similar betrayals. The new dual authorization system is working well, Diana reported during our monthly check-in call. She'd stayed at Oceanside, eventually taking over much of Catherine's former responsibilities under the new oversight structure. No one can process reimbursements or stipend payments without secondary approval now. It's made everyone more accountable. The policies I developed went beyond simple financial controls. I'd created comprehensive frameworks that protected employees from various forms of professional exploitation, from falsified credentials to manipulated scheduling systems. Each protocol was born from the painful lessons learned during those months of investigation and recovery. Catherine Stone had been sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. The hospital had recovered most of the stolen funds through insurance and legal proceedings, but the real cost, the erosion of trust among colleagues, had taken much longer to address. At Coastal Regional, I'd found a leadership team committed to transparency and ethical practices. My colleagues here knew my story, respected the expertise I'd gained through adversity, and supported the protective measures I'd implemented. The culture felt different. More open, more vigilant, but not paranoid. Trust but verify became my unofficial motto, borrowed from an old political phrase but perfectly applicable to healthcare administration. I'd learned to maintain professional relationships while implementing systems that prevented exploitation. It wasn't cynicism. It was wisdom earned through experience. The continuing education programs I now oversaw operated with complete transparency. Every reimbursement request was tracked through multiple checkpoints, every payment documented with digital signatures and audit trails. Staff members received detailed statements showing exactly how their professional development funds were being processed and distributed. During quiet moments, I sometimes thought about Catherine and wondered if she'd ever truly understood the damage she'd caused. The money was one thing, serious, but recoverable. The deeper wound was the way she'd weaponized our trust, turning our professional relationships into tools for exploitation. But those reflections came less frequently now. My focus had shifted to building something positive from the wreckage, creating systems that honored both the need for trust in healthcare teams and the reality that oversight protects everyone involved. The final court documents had been filed 6 months ago, officially closing the case that had upended so many lives. Diana and I had both testified at Catherine's sentencing hearing, our statements focusing not on revenge, but on the importance of accountability in healthcare settings. As I locked my office that evening, I felt the familiar satisfaction of meaningful work completed. The policies I developed were being adopted by other hospitals in our network, creating ripple effects of protection that extended far beyond my own experience. Walking to my car, I reflected on how much had changed since those first suspicious moments in Oceanside's break room. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. The courage to speak up, the persistence to seek justice, and the wisdom to transform pain into protection for others. I developed policies that protect employees from financial exploitation, ensuring that no one else would face the isolation and violation I'd experienced. The work felt like a form of healing, each safeguard a small victory against the kind of exploitation that had once seemed so overwhelming. The harbor lights reflected off my windshield as I drove home, their steady glow a reminder that even in darkness, there were always points of light to guide the way forward. The investigation was closed, the policies were implemented, and the future felt secure. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.